So they say you're not supposed to pick favorites, but I do personally think that this last one is the best one. Sorry, Cliff. Our final presenter is Davy from Windborne Systems. He actually came all the way from California, so we have a few folks traveling in for this presentation. Davy is the head of Agentic dev tools at Windborne, which is a company that is extremely cool. They launch weather balloons into space to get extremely valuable high atmosphere data. So Davy is the brains behind Windborne's industry-leading agent setup, and I've seen this thing in action. It is extremely cool and extremely powerful. We're trying to build our own version of that internally for ourselves. So we're very, very lucky that Davy flew in from California to tell us all about it. Davy?
Thank you. So, hello everyone, I'm Davy. I lead Agentic systems at Windborne. It's a role I like to think of as entity engineering, or most recently, Shodan plumbing, if you're familiar with the image of a Lovecraftian, understandable entity that we post-train to have a human shape. But while my peers before have really dove into how to get higher quality outputs out of your coding agents and how to get that faster, I want to take a step back, one layer abstraction, and ask the question of how do you get your agents to solve useful problems with the least amount of friction? And as a preview of what that looks like for us, is we have our AI coworker Shodan, who we can just ping in our chat platform with a incredibly underspecified request of like, look, this thing is broken, why didn't it do this thing, with a lot of implicit context about what our company is expecting, and it's able to look at the screenshot, look at the graph, get the chat context from the message above it, spin up a code execution environment, look at the code, look at the telemetry, deep dive, really get at what is happening and read between the lines and come up to a conclusion that our scientist agrees with. And a quick aside here is I want to dive into what the purpose of code is. And really it's just a structured, deterministic expression of how to transform information. And the biggest unlock with coding agents is that they can do this on the fly for bespoke problems. So the bottleneck isn't really producing code, it's having the initial alignment of what is the problem that this code can get you a useful output in the huge exploration space. And a failure mode I often see is what I like to call is stopping a tool-shaped integration. So you as an individual are using AI tools to optimize your own workflows, to do things faster, to do more than you could before, and that's very important, but you shouldn't just stop there. Because what that ends up being is you yourself as a bottleneck, if you're still copy-pasting things into a chat window, if you are still going through the effort of articulating the entire problem, the success criteria, and the constraints and trade-offs, you are still, even if you're using like Whisper Flow to get more bits per second, you are still the bottleneck, and that forces the agent to only be able to do things on a task granularity. The core unlock I want to talk about here is looking at your organization as a topology and where agents sit inside that. So what is an organization really? It's a series of nodes of decision makers and edges of information flow. And the unlock I want you to grasp is being able to place your agent directly in this organizational graph, because then instead of having to articulate that cognitive handoff as like, organizations grow, you get more bureaucracy, you get to the point where you have quarterly meetings to understand things that they can translate into a PM, to an engineer, to sprint planning, to something that a QA team looks at. You can just draw a new edge, shortcutting between those two nodes if you're able to throw more intelligence at it and it's able to capture that context. So this is what I like to think of as peer-shaped integration, right? Your agent isn't something that a person is translating between things. It is actually a coworker. It is in the graph. You're able to ping it directly and ask for things, and it's able to get the same context that another human engineer would have. And you might say, like, sure, this sounds great in theory, but how does this actually work at Windborne? And this is probably a good time to explain what Windborne is, because our agents have that exact same question every single time, right? You summon an agent, it wakes up being summoned from the void, tossed in a box, being told, please fix this, and has no idea who you are or what you're asking for it. So the TLDR of Windborne is we're trying to solve weather forecasting, and we're doing that by we invented a way to basically deploy an in-situ sensor anywhere on the planet to measure the atmosphere, and then are using those measurements to improve forecasting quality, and our goal is to get the 45-day weather forecast as accurate as the 48-hour. But that's not what this meeting is about. It's about how we use agents to get there. And so I want to call out two things that we do for agents. So So on the left here is what we call the index. And this is basically a source of truth on what Windborne is, right? Like we're a Delaware C Corp, we do weather balloons, we do weather forecasting, blah, blah, blah. And on the right here is our system for tracking our directives, milestones, and priorities in the company. So what we're focusing on and why. And the key thing here is both of these two things are agent first source of truth. So when an agent wakes up, it's able to access both of these two things as a starting guide to know what the source of truth is and where to find more information and why people are asking for specific things. The third thing down there is a search MCP we created for basically a vector store of our entire company's chat history. And fun fact, you can't really see on here at all, but the little dot all the way on the left is when I first created this, we had more human users going to the web page to search for answers, but that got immediately overtaken by bots. So now you have an agent, right, that understands the context of what your company is, what you're asking for, why, what's going on, what the priorities are. And because it's living synchronously in the source of truth, the actual fabric of where people are making decisions, discussing trade-offs, and converging on what needs to happen, the agent now passively captures all that in and is able to contextualize why you're asking for a specific bug fix or a feature. And you are bypassing the need for someone to articulate and capture that into like a spec file or an Asana task or something like that. And that is the core unlock that we've had. So again, interesting in theory, but I wanted to briefly run through some examples. I know we're running out of time, but yeah. So here is our agent Shodan. Basically, he's got a coding sandbox for every single conversation. You can ping anywhere in a chat platform. It'll spin up, has access to all these search tools, our code, Git history, live telemetry, read replica of our database. Also some calendar integrations and a dashboard for people to kind of look through the thinking traces and help debug. And what that gets us is a workflow where now engineering bandwidth is no longer a bottleneck, right? You can have stakeholders ask fundamental questions, look through years of data. You're not asking a data engineer to spin up pandas and create a slide deck for you. You're able to actually dig into what the code is doing, what changed, look through the entire tapestry of what has happened, and get the answers you need immediately. Question answering is also unblocked. One of the things we do is for every new hire, not just technical, every single new person in the company, we create a dedicated LLMs-person chat so that they can onboard themselves. They can ask our agent anything they want without fear of it being a dumb question or taking a senior engineer's time. It's able to understand what people's roles and responsibilities are, oftentimes more than new hires themselves. And it's also able to give visibility across the company. So when we do a code deployment, someone will be like, does this affect me? What's going to happen? They can get that answer instantly without waiting for a senior engineer to write a report and translate that. Another thing we did was digitize our entire manufacturing process. We build our own in-house hardware, and we basically turn that into an agent-first DAG that they can now understand the build process. And instead of going through multiple different platforms to maintain the source of truth, we made that agent first. So here, our CTO is able to say, hey, like, we want to tune this build process, and they can just be at the build station, say, oh, this isn't working, take a screenshot, take a photo with their phone, upload it, and say, hey, we need to update the process here. We need to use like 3 strips of Kapton instead of 2. And that all happens natively, and the agents get that source of truth embedded in all the future things that they do. The other plus here is that your agents get more context than you thought to add. Like if you were working on a feature, you might not have known what experiments a person 3 years ago tried but then left the company with. That's all in the chat history. The agent is able to look at that and identify things that you might not even thought to bring up. And the nice thing about this is it scales. So 2 workflows that I really like is one, whenever there's an alert, we just ping our agent to wake up and say, look at the telemetry, look at the code, any recent deploys could be causing this, is this transient, is there a fix we can do here? Or another thing is just wake up every Monday and look at our entire errors inbox and errors log and see like, okay, are there classes of problems that we didn't even think to make alerts for? And it can identify potential root causes, potential fixes, the risks of these deployments, and then create a nice report for our senior engineers to wake up to and decide what's worth deploying. A quick aside, so all these screenshots I just showed you are of Zulip, which is a open source alternative to Slack, and I'm a Slack hater for a couple reasons. One, it costs money. 2, you don't own your data, and 3, instead of threads, what Zulip does is it has this fundamental primitive of topics, which is basically infinitely parallel conversations inside a channel, and that very naturally steers towards very clear, explicit context windows. So when you spin up an agent, you have a very kind of granular discussion that it's able to read and understand exactly what you guys are talking about. So if anyone else here is on Zulip or thinking of moving to Zulip, we've actually open sourced a bare bones version of our bot framework, which I encourage you to check out. But anyway, where does this get us? So here's an example of one of our non-technical people out in the field having an issue. And it's not just a code issue, it's a process issue dealing with hardware. They're able to just complain. Our agent is able to spin up, understand, read between the lines, like what is the context of this person's request, come up with the PR that fixes it within, like 6 minutes. And then our engineer can say, yeah, that looks good to me. And fun fact, it took longer for the engineer to approve the PR than for the PR to get generated. So really, you're able to draw a new edge between the desire of someone and it being done. And that's because the agent has the correct context from the beginning. So what are some second order effects of this? It's a little strange because you have a real AI coworker now, right? It's got a name, a personality. We call her she. People have nicknames for Shodan, calling her Shodi. It's interesting because it's also not just for technical people, for everyone at our company. So a lot of non-technical people have this sort of like anthropomization and like expectations of memory, and there's interesting dynamics with that. But perhaps a more interesting second order effect is how this changes the economics of attention and where you throw your intelligence, right? You are no longer saying, oh, like, can I get this person's time to even like explore this thing? You can have an idea and it costs nothing to just get started and experiment. And more often than not, the agent is able to get the correct context to oftentimes correct yourself and get to an artifact that is then useful to present to someone else. I want to now just take a quick second to kind of get some tips on how to rewire your own organization for AI like this. Again, the thing I want to stress here is you want to optimize the graph and not each edge. You really want your agent to sit exactly where these sources of truth are in terms of decisions being made, your change records, what the constraints are, what trade-offs have been made, and why. And even if you're not like a fully digitized company, one of the things we found is quite helpful is we can just invite our agent into all the meetings. She gets the Gemini transcript, then wakes up, picks the correct place in our chat platform to start a session, and it can do any follow-up text. So sometimes we'll have like a manufacturing meeting and say, okay, like we need to evaluate 2 other part suppliers, like Shodan, when you see this, can you do a deep dive and look at the lead times and the cost trade-offs for the different volumes you want to purchase? And then 5 minutes later, you have that in your chat platform and you're good to go. The other thing I want to quickly touch upon for people who are actually building the agents themselves is this concept of bootstrapping your agent, right? It's just the paradox of you can't pull yourself up from your bootstraps. But in here, what I want to paint a picture of is you want to get as quickly as possible to the V0 of using your agent to improve itself, right? So instead of working in a terminal, you want to get to the point where you're actually like talking to your agent saying like, hey, like, does this MCP work for you? Like how is the context window looking? Like, is it intuitive? You want to get that bootstrap cycle because that really allows you to use the experience of the agent to continue optimizing itself. And another tip is to make this someone's full-time job at your organization, right? If the economics of what you can throw into that has changed so much to where now there's a whole new class of problems where you can just do 100 times faster or 100 times wider, and if you're able to really reevaluate that from first principles across your company, you can identify new edges to draw and new classes of things that were implicit assumptions in your entire strategy. So you want to have someone's job who can do that. Someone's job is also, making sure these sandboxes are secure and that the slop doesn't get out of control. But the kind of way I like to think about it is, calling back to the Shodan metaphor, is you want to have someone whose full-time job is giving it more tentacles and more eyes, and you will get more dividends out of that if you're able to embed it into your organizational structure directly. Yeah. Any questions?
a pretty nice talk. I was just wondering how you do deal with fragmented context when the answer is essentially like on multiple distinct places.
Sorry, fragmented context with.
When the answer is in multiple distinct places.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Like the agents are not correct 100% of the time, and one of the nice things about it being embedded directly in the chat platform is it also ends up being a multiplayer game in some sorts. So you can oftentimes have a junior engineer trying to solve something and be going down the wrong direction, and like a senior engineer can just pop in and be like, oh, like, by the way, here's some quick context. So it's not perfect from the start, but it ends up being the lowest friction way of coordination where the context implicitly can pop up. And also because these are all like agentic tools, the agents are able to verify against whatever criteria you have and go back and get more context if need be.
I have one question. So I've been lucky enough to see Shodan in action. I think it's really, really cool. I know it's like a really critical tool for AI enablement in your broader team. What would you say is the most surprising uplift or the most surprising benefit that you've seen from the implementation and the execution of Shodan? Like something that you never would have expected that became an emergent property from the way that it was designed?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is sort of the fact that you can schedule intelligent actions on a recurring basis. A lot of times I might be like, oh, like I need to deal with this thing eventually, but you can trust the fact that it's got a deterministic cron to wake up and do things, and you can apply that at scale. So, for example, a very selfish thing I do is every morning it wakes up, checks the weather, looks at the commute, and it tells me if I can drive with the top down. Or some other things it can do is it can synthesize between different things to produce artifacts that are useful for other people, and that ends up being something you don't even have to like think about consciously anymore.
Cool. I think if that's all the questions, then I think that might be it. Thank you so much, Davy.